Please, don't punish her.
The royal decree was absolute. The moment Astrid's trembling fingers closed around that loaf of bread in the market square, her fate was sealed under pack law. Alpha Stellan Vargsson had no tolerance for thieves in his territory, not when his bloodline demanded perfection, not when every action reflected upon the heir to the throne. The chariot was already moving, iron wheels grinding against cobblestone, carrying her toward the execution grounds beyond the northern gate. But then the small hand reached through the bars. Child's hand. His child's hand. And if you're feeling this moment as deeply as I am, tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug, because what happens next will break you in the most beautiful way. 3 days earlier, Astrid had been invisible. That's what poverty does in the realm of Vargam. It erases you from the eyes of those who matter. She'd learned to move through shadows, to take what she needed from the edges of prosperity where no one looked too closely. Her parents had died in the Great Frost 2 winters past, leaving her with nothing but their forbidden bloodline, the mark of the Silvern Pack, the ones who'd been exiled decades ago for refusing to bend knee to the Vargsson dynasty. She kept that heritage hidden beneath layers of dirt and hunger, because revelation meant death. The marketplace hummed with afternoon commerce. Vendors shouted prices for winter squash and salted fish. Children darted between stalls while their mothers haggled over fabric. Astrid watched the bakers stand from behind a wool merchant's cart, calculating. The woman who ran it was kind, but business was business, and Astrid's stomach had been empty for 2 days. The bread sat there on the wooden counter, golden and still warm, so close she could smell the yeast and butter. She didn't see the royal patrol when she moved. Didn't notice Commander Bjorn Eriksson watching from his midnight black stallion as her fingers wrapped around the loaf. Didn't hear his shout until it was too late. The market fell silent as death. Every eye turned toward her, toward the bread in her hands, toward the commander's drawn sword catching winter sunlight. Pack law was simple. Theft from any merchant under Alpha protection warranted immediate arrest and trial. But theft in the presence of the royal guard, that was a statement. Challenge. An insult to the Alpha himself. They dragged her through streets she'd walked freely just moments before. Now those same people, neighbors, familiar faces, people who'd once smiled at her parents, turned away. Fear does that. It makes strangers of friends, makes cowards of the compassionate. The Alpha's justice was legendary and terrible, and no one risked his wrath for a thief, especially not one who carried the scent of silvern blood, though they couldn't possibly know that yet. The palace grounds stretched before her like a mouth waiting to swallow. White stone towers pierced clouds, banners of silver and black snapping in wind that smelled of pine and coming snow. They threw her into a holding cell beneath the great hall, where stone wept moisture and the only light came from torches that never quite pushed back the darkness. She wasn't alone. 3 others occupied cells nearby. A man who'd failed to pay his trade taxes, a woman accused of poisoning her husband's ale, and someone who wouldn't stop screaming about demons in the walls. Hours passed like years. Then the door at the top of the stairs opened and she heard the footsteps. Heavy, measured, deliberate. Alpha Stellan Vargsson descended into the darkness like judgment made flesh. She'd seen him before, of course. Everyone had. He appeared at festivals and ceremonies, gave speeches from palace balconies, led the spring hunts that marked each new season. But she'd never been this close. Had never felt the weight of his presence, the way the air itself seemed to bend around him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with hair the color of wheat in autumn and eyes like winter ice. Scars marked his knuckles and one traced his jaw, evidence of battles fought and won. He wore power the way other men wore cloaks, and right now that power was focused entirely on her. He studied her through the bars without speaking. She forced herself to meet his gaze, though everything in her screamed to look away, to submit, to beg. Pride was all she had left, and she wouldn't surrender it even now. Finally he spoke. His voice was deep, cold as the north wind. You stole from Merchant Ingrid's stand. In broad daylight. In front of my commander. It wasn't a question. Astrid said nothing. The punishment for theft under pack law is 50 lashes for the first offense. He paused, letting that sink in. But theft committed in view of the royal guard carries additional penalty. Suggests contempt, rebellion, a challenge to my authority. Still she remained silent. What could she say? That she'd been starving. That desperation had made her careless. That she was sorry. None of it mattered. The law didn't care about empty bellies or dead parents or the impossible weight of simply surviving. "You'll be executed at dawn," Stellan said, and there wasn't even anger in his voice. Just finality. "Your body will be displayed at the northern gate as a reminder to others who might consider defying pack law." He turned to leave. That should have been the end of it. But something made her speak. "I'm not afraid of death, Alpha. I've been dying slowly for 2 years. You're just finishing what hunger started." He stopped, turned back. For the first time, something flickered in those ice-blue eyes. Not mercy exactly, but curiosity. "You think that absolves you? That suffering gives you permission to steal? I think your pack law is convenient for those who've never known what it's like to choose between honor and starvation." The words hung in the frozen air between them. Several guards reached for their weapons, shocked by her audacity. But Stellan raised a hand, stopping them. "What's your name?" "Astrid." "Family name?" She hesitated. This was where it ended, blood oath or not. "I have none. My parents are dead. I have no pack." A lie, but perhaps he'd believe it. Perhaps she'd die simply as a thief rather than as Silverin born, which would at least spare her the torture that preceded such executions. Stellan stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Dawn then. Make peace with whatever gods you serve." He climbed the stairs and disappeared, taking the light with him. Astrid didn't sleep. She listened to the screaming prisoner and the dripping water and her own heartbeat counting down the hours. She thought about her parents, about the stories they'd told of the old days when Silverin and Vargsson packs had been allies, before the betrayal, before the exile. She thought about everything she'd never do, never see, never become. 22 years of life condensed into a single night of regrets and memories. Dawn came gray and cold. The guards arrived with rough efficiency, binding her wrists with iron chains that bit into skin. They led her up from the dungeons, through corridors she'd never seen, out into a courtyard where the execution chariot waited. It was an ancient thing, blackwood reinforced with iron, pulled by 2 massive war horses that stamped and snorted in the morning chill. A mobile execution platform, designed so the condemned could be paraded through the city as a warning before reaching the killing grounds. Commander Bjorn himself secured her chains to the chariot's center post. His face was impassive, professional. This was just another duty, another morning, another thief meeting justice. The driver cracked his whip. The horses lurched forward. The chariot began to roll. They took her through the market district first, past the very stall where she'd stolen the bread. Merchant Ingrid stood in her doorway, hand over her mouth, eyes wet with tears she wouldn't shed publicly. Other merchants watched with satisfaction, justice being served, order being maintained. The crowd that gathered grew larger as they moved through the streets, people emerging from homes and shops to witness the Alpha's judgment made manifest. Astrid kept her head high. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Wouldn't cry or plead or beg. If these were her final moments, she'd face them with whatever dignity remained. The chariot turned onto the main thoroughfare leading toward the northern gate. The crowd here was thicker, noisier, more aggressive. Some threw rotted vegetables. Others shouted insults. A few called for her blood with enthusiasm that made her stomach turn. This was entertainment for them, a break in the monotony of their safe, comfortable lives. That's when she saw him. Alpha Stellan stood on a palace balcony overlooking the rout, watching with that same cold expression he'd worn in the dungeons. Beside him stood a woman, blonde, beautiful, dressed in finery that marked her as someone important. Lady Signa, Astrid realized. The Alpha's betrothed, the match that would unite 2 powerful packs and secure Stellan's position for generations. The chariot rolled closer to the gate. closer to the execution grounds beyond. Astrid could see the wooden posts where they'd chain her, the raised platform where Stellan would deliver the formal condemnation before the executioner's blade fell. Her heart began to race despite her resolve. Fear, primal and undeniable, crawled up her spine. Then the child appeared. He came from nowhere, this tiny boy with golden curls and a face like an angel. He couldn't have been more than 3 years old, wearing clothes too fine for playing in the streets. He ran directly into the chariot's path, small legs pumping, chubby hands reaching upward. The driver yanked the reins. The horses screamed. The chariot lurched to a violent halt that nearly threw Astrid against her chains. Guards rushed forward, shouting, trying to grab the child. But the boy was impossibly fast. He ducked under their grasping hands and scrambled up the chariot's side with the determination only toddlers possess. Before anyone could stop him, he was inside, throwing his small body against Astrid's legs, wrapping his arms around her knees. "No!" the child shouted, his voice high and fierce. "No, hurt her. She's nice." The entire street fell silent. Astrid stared down at the boy clinging to her, unable to process what was happening. His hair caught the morning light like spun gold. His eyes, those eyes were ice blue, identical to the ones that had condemned her hours before. The Alpha's son. The heir to the throne. The future of the Vargsson dynasty was wrapped around her legs, defending her life with his body. Commander Bjorn had gone pale as death. Guards surrounded the chariot but none dared touch the child, not without direct orders. From the balcony above, Astrid heard a woman scream. Lady Signa, realizing her child was missing, seeing him now in the most dangerous place imaginable. Then Stellan was there. He must have moved the instant his son appeared, because suddenly he stood beside the chariot. His face a mask of fury and fear that transformed his cold control into something volcanic. "Lars," he said, and his voice shook. "Step away from her. Now." The boy tightened his grip on Astrid's legs. "No, Papa, she's sad. She's hungry. Don't hurt her. She broke the law, son. She must face justice." "No." Lars's face scrunched up, tears starting to flow. "She's good. I know she's good." Stellan's jaw clenched. He reached into the chariot, but the moment he tried to pull Lars away, the boy started screaming with a kind of piercing intensity only a toddler can achieve. The sound echoed off stone buildings, made the horses nervous, sent birds scattering from nearby roofs. "Lars Stellanson, you will obey me." But the child wouldn't let go. He clung to Astrid like she was salvation itself, sobbing so hard his small body shook. And Astrid, who'd prepared herself for death, who'd built walls around her heart to face this moment with dignity, those walls crumbled. She looked down at this innocent child, this boy who didn't understand politics or pack law or why the world was so cruel, and something inside her shattered. Before she could stop herself, her chained hands awkwardly patted his golden curls. "It's all right, little one," she whispered. "Don't cry for me." Stellan's eyes snapped to hers, and in them she saw something she hadn't seen before. Conflict. The Alpha, who'd sentenced her without hesitation, who'd shown no mercy, suddenly looked uncertain. Lady Signa arrived then, breathless from running, her fine dress dirty at the hem. "Lars. Oh gods, Lars." She reached for her son, but he twisted away, still holding Astrid. "Mama, tell Papa. Tell him she's good." Signa's eyes met Astrid's across the chariot, and for a moment they were just two women, both trapped by circumstances beyond their control. Then Signa looked at Stellan with an expression Astrid couldn't quite read. "Perhaps," Lady Signa said carefully, "we should discuss this in private, my lord." "There's nothing to discuss. The law is. Your son is in an execution chariot, Stellan." Signa's voice cracked. "Whatever the law says, look at him." The crowd had grown massive now. Hundreds of people pressed close, witnessing this impossible scene. Whispers rippled through them like wine through wheat. The Alpha's heir defending a thief. The Alpha hesitating. Pack law being challenged by a 3-year-old's tears. Stellan stood frozen, his hand still extended toward his son. His face a war between duty and love. Finally he spoke, each word costing him something. Take her back to the dungeons. The execution is postponed pending further review. The crowd erupted. Some cheered the mercy, others shouted protests, demanding justice be served. Commander Bjorn looked like he'd swallowed poison but gave the order. Guards moved forward to unlock Astrid's chains from the post. Lars finally released her legs, but only because Stellan lifted him bodily from the chariot. The boy fought, screaming and crying, reaching back toward Astrid as his father carried him away. The sound of his distress followed Astrid as they led her back toward the palace, back to the dungeons she thought she'd left forever. But everything had changed. She'd been saved by a child who couldn't possibly understand what he'd done, who'd somehow seen past her crime to something else, something even she didn't fully understand. Back in her cell, Astrid collapsed against the stone wall, shaking. The other prisoners peppered her with questions she couldn't answer. What happened? Why did they bring you back? Is it true the Alpha's son saved you? She had no answers, only questions of her own, spiraling endlessly through her mind. Why had Lars appeared? How had a toddler known where the execution route would pass? Why had he defended her with such certainty, such conviction? Hours passed. The light from the high window shifted as the sun moved across the sky. Astrid expected them to come back, to finish what they'd started. Surely Stellan would override his son's intervention, would assert his authority and restore Pack Law's dominance. But no one came. Not that day or that night or the next morning. On the third day the door opened. This time it wasn't Stellan who descended the stairs. It was Lady Signa, accompanied by 2 handmaids and a guard who looked deeply uncomfortable with this arrangement. Signa studied Astrid through the bars with eyes that missed nothing. She was even more beautiful up close, with features that belonged in legend. High cheekbones, flawless skin, hair like spun silver. But there was intelligence there too, and something else. Calculation. You've caused quite the disruption, Signa said finally. I didn't ask for your son's intervention, my lady. No, I suppose you didn't. But here we are. Signa gestured to the guard, who unlocked the cell door with obvious reluctance. Come with me. Where? To explain yourself to the council. They've demanded a hearing. The Alpha cannot simply release you without due process, but neither can he execute you now that Lars has made such a public declaration. So we compromise. You'll plead your case before the Pack elders. Astrid's stomach dropped. The council was composed of the oldest, most traditional members of the Vargsson pack, elders who'd spent decades building and maintaining the law Astrid had broken. They'd be even less merciful than Stellan. But she had no choice. She followed Signa up from the dungeons, through corridors of polished stone and tapestried walls, into parts of the palace she'd only ever imagined. Servants pressed themselves against walls as they passed, eyes downcast. Word had spread fast. The thief who'd charmed the heir, the criminal who'd somehow stopped her own execution. They entered a chamber dominated by a massive oval table. 12 elders sat in high-backed chairs, their faces weathered by age and authority. At the head of the table sat Stellan himself, and to his right stood Commander Bjorn. The expressions ranged from curiosity to outright hostility. Elder Torsten, the oldest among them, spoke first. His voice rattled like wine through dead leaves. Astrid No-Name, you stand accused of theft under pack law. How do you plead? Guilty, Elder. Surprise flickered across several faces. Clearly they'd expected excuses, justifications, pleas for mercy. You admit your crime freely. I stole bread. I was hungry. I knew the law. I did it anyway. Astrid met their stares without flinching. I don't ask for forgiveness. But I won't lie about what I did. Elder Karina, a sharp-faced woman with silver hair braided to her waist, leaned forward. Then why shouldn't we execute you as originally sentenced? Because your heir saw something in me worth defending, and perhaps you should ask yourselves why a child's instincts were more merciful than your law. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Several elders gasped. Commander Bjorn's hand went to his sword. But Stellan raised a hand, stopping any response. Careful, thief. You're not in a position to criticize. I'm in a position to be honest, Alpha. I have nothing left to lose. Stellan's eyes narrowed. You think my son's intervention gives you protection? I think your son saw a hungry woman and responded with compassion, something your law apparently doesn't account for. Elder Torsten struck the table. Enough. The law exists to maintain order, to prevent chaos. If we make exceptions for every sob story, for every desperate criminal, the pack falls apart. Then perhaps the pack deserves to fall apart, Astrid shot back. If your order requires starving your own people to death. The room erupted. Elders shouted over each other, demanding immediate execution, calling for her tongue to be cut out, suggesting torture before death. But underneath the outrage, Astrid saw something else. Uncertainty. Her words had struck deeper than they wanted to admit. Lady Signa, who'd been silent until now, spoke with surprising steel. May I offer a perspective, honored elders? The room quieted. Signa commanded respect that Astrid could only envy. My son is 3 years old. He cannot understand complex law or political necessity. But he possesses something we've perhaps forgotten in our pursuit of order. He sees people, not crimes. He saw a woman in chains and recognized suffering. She paused, looking directly at Stellan. Perhaps there's wisdom in that simplicity. Stellan's expression remained unreadable. You suggest we overturn centuries of pack law because a toddler felt pity? I suggest we consider whether our law serves the pack or merely our pride. The words hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. Astrid watched Stellan's face, saw the conflict there. The Alpha who ruled with iron certainty suddenly questioning everything. Elder Magnus, who'd been silent throughout, finally spoke. He was younger than the others, perhaps only 50, with kind eyes that seemed out of place among the harsh judgments surrounding them. There is precedent for mercy under exceptional circumstances. The law allows for the Alpha to grant clemency when a blood oath is offered. A blood oath? Astrid didn't understand. An ancient tradition, Magnus explained. If someone of status offers to take responsibility for a criminal's reformation, to vouch for their future behavior with their own life, the Alpha may choose to grant mercy. If the criminal reoffends, both are executed. Astrid's heart began to pound. Who would possibly? I would. Every head turned toward the doorway. Standing there, still in his fine clothes but with dirt on his small hands and determination on his cherubic face, was Lars. Behind him stood a horrified nursemaid who'd clearly lost track of her charge. Lars! Signa rushed toward him. You shouldn't be here. I want to help her, Mama. The boy's voice was fierce despite his size. She needs help. Stellan stood, his chair scraping against stone. Lars, you don't understand what you're offering. I do. Nursemaid told me about blood oaths. I want to give mine to her. You're 3 years old. You cannot make blood oaths. Then you do it, Papa. Lars ran to his father, grabbing his hand with both of his tiny ones. Please. I know she's good. I know it. The room fell into stunned silence. Astrid felt tears threatening. This child, this innocent boy who disrupted everything, was willing to tie his fate to hers. Was willing to ask his father to do the same. Stellan looked down at his son, and Astrid saw something crack in his icy control. The Alpha, the ruler, the enforcer of law, none of that mattered compared to the tiny hand gripping his. Elder Torsten broke the silence. This is unprecedented. The Alpha himself offering blood oath for a common thief. It would undermine everything we've built. Or, Elder Magnus countered quietly, it would show that our law is flexible enough to recognize unique circumstances. That our Alpha values mercy alongside justice. The debate raged for hours. Elders argued precedent and tradition, consequences and appearances. Through it all, Lars refused to leave, sitting on his father's lap, occasionally piping up with childish certainty that Astrid was good, that she deserved help, that Papa should save her. Finally, as afternoon light slanted through high windows, Stellan spoke with a voice that ended all discussion. "I will offer blood oath." The elders fell silent. "But," he continued, staring directly at Astrid, "there are conditions. She will live in the palace under constant supervision. She will work to repay her debt to society through service. And if she commits any crime, any violation of pack law, we both die. Are we clear?" Astrid couldn't breathe. The Alpha of Vargham, the most powerful man in the realm, was tying his life to hers. Because his son had asked him to. Because something in this impossible situation had penetrated his armor. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk this?" Stellan's eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw past the ice to something deeper. "Because my son sees something I've apparently missed. Because Lady Signa is right. Perhaps I've forgotten what it means to lead people rather than enforce law." He paused. "And because you spoke truth when you could have begged. That's worth something." The blood oath ceremony took place immediately, before anyone could change their minds. They stood in the center of the council chamber while Elder Magnus intoned ancient words in the old tongue. A ceremonial knife was produced, its blade sharp enough to split silk. Stellan held out his palm, then gestured for Astrid to do the same. The blade cut quick and clean. Blood welled bright red against their skin. They pressed their palms together, and Astrid felt something surge through her. Not magic exactly, but connection. A binding that went deeper than flesh, that tied her fate irrevocably to his. "By blood and oath I claim responsibility," Stellan spoke the ritual words. "Her crimes are my crimes. Her failures are my failures. Her death is my death. I accept this bond," Astrid heard herself say, the traditional response. "I swear to honor the trust placed in me, to uphold pack law, to serve with my life the one who spared it." Their palms remained pressed together for a long moment, blood mixing, the oath settling into their very bones. When they finally separated, Elder Magnus wrapped their hands in clean white cloth. "The bond is sealed. May it bring honor to you both." Lars clapped his hands, bouncing with excitement that seemed wildly inappropriate for the gravity of what had just occurred. "Papa did it. Now she can stay." Signa's expression was complicated, relief mixed with something else Astrid couldn't quite identify. She collected Lars, murmuring about dinner and bedtime, but her eyes lingered on Stellan with questions that would clearly be asked in private. The elders departed one by one, some satisfied, others clearly unhappy with the outcome. Commander Bjorn lingered near the door, his face troubled. "My lord, are you certain about this?" "No, Bjorn. I'm not certain about anything anymore." Stellan unwrapped his hand, studying the cut that had already begun to heal. "But Lars was so sure. And he's never been wrong about people before. He's 3. Sometimes children see more clearly than adults." Stellan finally looked at Astrid, really looked at her, and she saw the weight of what he'd done settling onto his shoulders. "You'll be given chambers in the servants' wing. You'll work in the kitchens under cook Margaret's supervision. You'll be watched constantly. And you'll report to me every evening to account for your day." "Yes, Alpha. Don't make me regret this, Astrid No Name." "I'll try not to." He studied her for another long moment, then turned and left, Commander Bjorn following. Astrid stood alone in the council chamber, her hand throbbing where the blood oath cut burned, her mind reeling from everything that had happened. 3 days ago she'd been invisible, starving, stealing bread to survive. Now she was blood-bound to the Alpha himself, living in the palace, her life spared by the intervention of a 3-year-old who somehow knew she deserved saving. The question that haunted her as servants led her to her new chambers was simple and terrifying. Why? Why had Lars appeared at that exact moment? Why had he been so certain of her goodness? And why did the Alpha's ice-blue eyes seem to look past her crime to something deeper, something even she didn't understand? She was about to find out that sometimes salvation is more complicated than death, and that the price of mercy can be higher than the cost of justice. The servants' wing was modest but comfortable, a vast improvement over both the dungeons and the freezing hovel where she'd been living before her arrest. Her room was small, containing only a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window overlooking the kitchen gardens. But it was warm, dry, and safe. For someone who'd spent 2 years barely surviving, it felt like luxury. Cook Margaret appeared before dawn the next morning, a mountain of a woman with flour perpetually dusting her apron and eyes that saw everything. "So you're the thief what stole bread and somehow charmed the young master into saving your neck." Margaret crossed her arms, studying Astrid with professional skepticism. "Alpha says you're to work for me. Says I'm to watch you close and report anything suspicious. That sound about right?" "Yes, ma'am." "Don't ma'am me. I'm Margaret, you're Astrid, and we've got breakfast for 300 to prepare. You any good with a knife?" "I can chop vegetables." "Then get to it. Carrots need dicing for the morning porridge." The kitchen was chaos given form, fires roaring in massive hearths, pots bubbling, meat roasting, bread baking. A dozen servants moved in practiced choreography, each knowing their role in the daily miracle of feeding the palace. Astrid fell into the rhythm slowly at first, then with growing confidence. The work was hard but honest, and for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of where her next meal would come from. Around mid-morning, while she was elbow-deep in bread dough, Lars appeared in the kitchen doorway. His nursemaid, a stern woman named Helga, tried to redirect him, but the boy was determined. "Astrid!" He ran toward her, face bright with joy. Astrid glanced at Margaret, who nodded permission. She wiped her hands on her apron and knelt to the boy's level. "Hello, little one. Shouldn't you be in lessons?" "I'm learning letters, but I wanted to see you. Are they being nice to you? Are you happy here?" His concern was so genuine, so pure, that Astrid felt tears threaten. "Everyone's been kind. Thank you for what you did. You saved my life." Lars threw his arms around her neck, heedless of the flour dusting her clothes. "I'm glad. I knew Papa would help if I asked. He always helps people." Helga finally caught up, breathless and apologetic. "Master Lars, you cannot simply run off. Your mother will." "It's all right, Helga." Lady Signa appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Let him visit for a moment." The kitchen fell silent. Every servant stopped what they were doing, bowing or curtsying. Signa waved them back to work with casual authority, then approached Astrid and Lars. "So this is where you've ended up?" "Yes, my lady. I'm grateful for the work." Signa studied her with those intelligent eyes. "My son speaks of you constantly. He's told everyone within earshot that you're his friend, that Papa saved you because you're special." He paused. "He's very rarely wrong about people. I don't understand why he helped me, my lady. I'm no one." "Perhaps that's exactly why. Lars sees people, not positions. It's both his greatest strength and his greatest vulnerability." Signa's gaze sharpened. "Don't take advantage of his trust, Astrid. That would be a cruelty I couldn't forgive." "I would never." "Good. Then we understand each other." Signa collected Lars, who protested but ultimately obeyed. At the doorway she paused. "The Alpha wants to see you this evening. Don't keep him waiting." After they left, the kitchen slowly returned to normal. But Astrid noticed the other servants watching her differently now, with curiosity, wariness, perhaps a touch of envy. She'd been elevated from anonymous thief to someone the Alpha's family acknowledged, someone who warranted the lady's attention. The day passed in a blur of work. By evening, Astrid's hands were raw from scrubbing pots, her back ached from carrying water, and she smelled like onions and would smoke. When a page appeared to summon her to the Alpha's study, she had no time to make herself presentable. She went as she was, dirty, exhausted, and increasingly nervous. The Alpha's study was everything his public chambers were not: personal, cluttered with maps and correspondence, lined with books that looked well-read rather than merely decorative. Stellan sat behind a massive oak desk, still in his formal tunic but with the top buttons undone, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. "Sit." He gestured to a chair across from him. Astrid sat, acutely aware of how out of place she looked in this space of power and privilege. Stellan studied her for a long moment. "Margaret reports you work hard and cause no trouble. I'm trying to honor the oath, Alpha. Are you?" He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Or are you just biding time until you can run?" The question caught her off guard. "I gave my word. Words are cheap. I need to know if I made a catastrophic mistake tying my life to yours." Astrid met his gaze steadily. "Then watch me. Judge me by my actions, not my past. I can't undo stealing that bread, but I can prove I'm worth the risk you took." Something flickered in his expression. Approval maybe, or perhaps just surprise at her directness. "Tell me about yourself. The truth this time. Who are you really, Astrid No Name?" Her heart began to pound. This was dangerous ground. "I told you. My parents died in the frost. I have no pack." "That's not a lie, but it's not the whole truth either." Stellan pulled out a piece of parchment covered in neat handwriting. "I had Commander Bjorn investigate. Your parents were Halvar and Freya Silvran. They were exiled 25 years ago when the Silvran Pack refused to acknowledge my father's claim to alpha leadership." The world tilted. Astrid gripped the chair arms to steady herself. "How did you?" "Your eyes. They're amber with silver flecks, a Silvran trait. Once I knew what to look for, the rest was easy." He set down the parchment. "You carry forbidden bloodline, Astrid. That alone is grounds for execution under pack law." Terror flooded through her. After everything, after Lars's intervention and the blood oath, it all ended here anyway. "Then kill me. But don't blame your son for showing mercy to the wrong person." "I'm not going to kill you." She stared at him, uncomprehending. Stellan stood, walking to the window overlooking the city. "The exile of the Silvran Pack was my father's decision, not mine. I've always thought it was excessive. They disagreed with his leadership, so he banished them all, seized their lands, made their name synonymous with betrayal." He turned back to her. "I'm not my father. And I won't punish you for blood you didn't choose." Astrid couldn't process what she was hearing. "You're saying my heritage doesn't matter. I'm saying it complicates things, but it doesn't change the blood oath. If anything, it makes what Lars did even more significant. He saved a Silvran. That's either prophecy or coincidence. And I stopped believing in coincidence years ago." "What does that mean?" Stellan returned to his desk, pulling out an ancient-looking book bound in cracked leather. "There's an old legend. When the Silvran and Vargsson packs were allies, before the betrayal, there was a prophecy. It said that when the two bloodlines reunited through an act of pure compassion, the packs would be healed and the realm would enter an age of prosperity." Astrid's throat went dry. "You think Lars stopping the chariot? I think my 3-year-old son somehow knew you were important. I think he acted on instinct that may be wiser than all our careful law and tradition. And I think we're all standing at a crossroads we don't fully understand." The weight of revelation pressed down on Astrid. She'd thought she was nobody, nothing, just a thief trying to survive. Now the Alpha was suggesting she might be part of some ancient prophecy, that her bloodline mattered more than she'd ever imagined. "I don't know anything about prophecies or destiny," she said finally. "I'm just trying not to starve. And that honesty is exactly why Lars trusted you." Stellan sat down again, suddenly looking tired. "I need you to understand something, Astrid. There are people in this court who will hate you for your bloodline, who will see you as a threat or an insult. The blood oath protects you legally, but it won't protect you from their hostility. I can handle hostility. I've been handling it my whole life. Not like this. These are people who smile while planning your downfall, who'll use every rule and tradition against you. Commander Bjorn already questions my decision. Half the council thinks I've gone mad. And Lady Signa. He stopped himself. What about Lady Signa? She's been my betrothed for 5 years. The marriage was arranged by our families to unite our packs. She's smart, capable, and politically savvy. But she's also trapped in an engagement to a man who's never loved her. The admission hung in the air between them. Astrid didn't know what to say. The personal life of the Alpha wasn't her concern, except that she was now bound to him by blood oath. Her fate tied to his in ways that made everything personal. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand the currents beneath the surface. Signa has accepted our arrangement with grace, but Lars is her son, her heart. If she thinks you're a threat to him, blood oath or not, she'll find a way to remove you. I would never hurt Lars. I believe you. But belief doesn't change politics. Stellan rubbed his eyes, a gesture so human it startled her. Get some rest. Tomorrow your real education begins. If you're going to survive in this palace, you need to learn how to navigate it. Astrid stood, still reeling from everything. At the door she paused. Alpha, thank you. For not executing me for my bloodline. For giving me a chance. Don't thank me yet. The hard part is just beginning. The weeks that followed were brutal in ways Astrid hadn't anticipated. The physical labor in the kitchen she could handle. What she struggled with was the constant scrutiny, the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms, the servants who refused to eat near her once they learned about her Silvern blood. Commander Bjorn was particularly hostile. He never spoke to her directly, but his presence was a constant reminder that one misstep would mean death for both her and Stellan. He assigned guards to watch her every movement, questioned the other servants about her behavior, and made it clear he was waiting for her to fail. Lady Signa, by contrast, was more subtle. She was never unkind, but there was a distance, an assessment in her eyes whenever they crossed paths. She allowed Lars to visit Astrid in the kitchens but always supervised, never leaving them alone. It was clear she was reserving judgment, waiting to see what Astrid would become. Lars himself was oblivious to the tension. He visited daily, chattering about his lessons, showing Astrid drawings he'd made, asking questions about everything. He'd decided Astrid was his friend, and in the way of children, that was absolute and unshakable. When I'm Alpha, he announced one afternoon while Astrid was kneading bread, I'm going to change the laws. No one will have to be hungry anymore. That's a noble goal, little one. Papa says being Alpha means protecting everyone, not just the strong people. He says that's what makes a good leader. Astrid glanced at Helga, who hovered nearby. The nursemaid's expression softened slightly. Even she couldn't resist Lars's innocent wisdom. Your papa is very wise. He likes you, Lars said with the blunt honesty only children possess. He talks about you at dinner. Mama gets quiet when he does. Helga quickly redirected Lars to another topic, but the damage was done. Astrid's mind raced. What did Stellan say about her? And why would that make Signa uncomfortable? That evening's report to the Alpha's study felt different. Stellan seemed distracted, repeatedly losing track of her accounts of the day's work. Finally, he interrupted her mid-sentence. There's a situation developing. The council has called a special session tomorrow. They want to review the terms of the blood oath. Astrid's stomach dropped. Can they do that? They can try. Elder Torsten has been gathering support, arguing that I acted rashly, that the oath should be dissolved given your Silvern heritage. What happens if they dissolve it? Stellan's jaw tightened. Then you're subject to standard law again. Which means execution for both the original theft and for concealing your bloodline. And you? What happens to you? Nothing. The oath would be nullified before any consequences could attach. He met her eyes. You need to understand, if it comes to it, I won't die for you. I have responsibilities, a son, a pack that needs leadership. The oath was a calculated risk, but if the council forces dissolution, I'll accept it. His words shouldn't have hurt. They were logical, reasonable. But something inside Astrid cracked anyway. For a few weeks, she'd allowed herself to imagine she mattered, that her life had value beyond mere survival. Now reality reasserted itself. "I understand, Alpha." "Do you?" He stood abruptly, pacing. "Because I'm not sure I do anymore. A month ago, I would have executed you without hesitation. Justice was simple, clean. Now everything's complicated. Lars watches me with those trusting eyes, believing I can fix anything. Signa grows quieter every day, and I can see her calculating whether I've finally lost my mind. The council questions my judgment. And you?" He stopped, looking at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "You work hard, cause no trouble, and somehow make me question everything I thought I knew about leadership. I don't mean to cause problems. That's the issue. You're not trying to cause anything. You're just existing, and that existence challenges the entire foundation of pack law." He returned to his desk, suddenly looking older. "Tomorrow at the council session, they'll argue that Sylvan blood is corruption, that you're a threat simply by breathing. You'll need to defend yourself." "How do I defend against what I was born as?" "By showing them who you've become." The council session was held in the Great Hall, with hundreds of pack members in attendance. This wasn't a private deliberation among elders. This was theater, a public examination of the Alpha's judgment. Astrid stood in the center of the room, feeling every eye on her like physical weight. Elder Torsten presented his case with rhetorical precision. The Sylvan pack was exiled for treason against the rightful Alpha. They chose rebellion over loyalty, chose pride over pack. Their blood carries that rebellion still, passed down through generations. This woman, he gestured at Astrid with barely concealed disgust, hid her heritage, stole from honest merchants, and now lives in our palace under protection of blood oath. She represents everything our law was designed to prevent. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Astrid saw faces twisted with hatred, fear, self-righteousness. These people didn't know her, but they'd already decided what she was. Elder Magnus rose to counter. The girl's parents were children when the exile occurred. They committed no crime except being born to the wrong family. And this woman has committed only one crime: stealing bread to survive. Shall we execute her for hunger and heritage? The law is clear. Torsten shot back. Concealing Sylvan blood is a capital offense. The Alpha himself wrote that statute after the exile. My father wrote that statute. Stellan's voice cut through the debate like a blade. He stood from his throne, and the room fell silent. I've been reviewing pack law extensively over the past month. My father's laws regarding the Sylvan were born from anger and fear, not justice. He feared their influence, their moral challenges to his authority. So he made their existence illegal. And with good reason. Torsten gestured wildly. The Sylvan nearly split the pack. The Sylvan asked questions about how power was being used. They advocated for the poor, the weak, the ones who couldn't defend themselves. My father saw that as rebellion. I see it as conscience. Stellan descended from the platform, walking toward Astrid. This woman stole bread because she was starving. When caught, she didn't beg or lie or make excuses. She accepted responsibility for her actions. When offered mercy, she didn't waste it. She works harder than half the servants in my palace. She asks for nothing beyond the chance to prove her worth. He stopped beside her, and Astrid felt the heat of his presence, the power barely contained. You want to know if I'll dissolve the blood oath? If I'll sacrifice her to satisfy tradition? Stellan looked around the room, meeting the eyes of elders, council members, common pack members. No, the oath stands. Not because my son asked me to save her, though his compassion shames us all. Not because prophecy suggests the Sylvan and Vargsson bloodlines were meant to reunite. But because dissolving that oath would mean I value the comfort of tradition over the courage of change. The hall erupted. Arguments broke out everywhere, some supporting Stellan, others demanding he reconsider. Elder Torsten looked apoplectic, shouting about consequences and precedent. Through it all, Astrid stood frozen, unable to process that the Alpha, the man who'd sentenced her to death, was now defending her before the entire pack. Lady Signa rose from her seat beside the throne. The crowd quieted, curious. She'd been silent through the entire proceeding. "May I speak?" Stellan nodded, looking wary. Signa descended to the floor, walking until she stood facing Astrid. For a long moment, the two women simply looked at each other. The lady and the thief, the woman who had everything and the woman who'd had nothing. "I have watched you for a month," Signa said quietly, but her voice carried. "I've watched how you work, how you treat others, how you interact with my son. I've been suspicious, doubtful, waiting for you to reveal some hidden agenda." He paused. "But you haven't. You've been exactly what you appear to be. A woman trying to survive, to prove her worth, to honor a debt she didn't ask for but accepted anyway." Astrid's throat tightened. "My son saw something in you the rest of us missed. He saw someone worth saving. And perhaps," Signa glanced at Stellan, something complicated passing between them, "perhaps he saw what I've been too afraid to acknowledge. That mercy and justice aren't opposites. That protecting the law matters less than protecting people." She turned back to the council. "I support the Alpha's decision. The blood oath stands. Astrid Silverin is under my personal protection as well." The crowd exploded again, but this time the tide had turned. If both the Alpha and his betrothed defended the thief, who were the elders to argue? Elder Torsten tried to rally support, but the energy had shifted. Within an hour, the council formally acknowledged the blood oath's validity. Astrid wanted to cry, to scream, to collapse. Instead, she stood straight-backed and silent, the way her parents had taught her. Never show weakness to those who'd use it against you. After the session ended, after the crowds dispersed, Stellan found her in the gardens where she'd retreated to process everything. Night had fallen, stars scattered across black sky like thrown diamonds. "You didn't have to do that," Astrid said without looking at him. "Defending me like that might cost you politically." "Probably." He stood beside her, looking up at the stars. "But Lars was right. He's 3 years old and he understood something I'd forgotten. That leadership without compassion is just tyranny with better paperwork." Lady Signa's support surprised me. It surprised me too. We've been engaged for 5 years, barely more than cordial strangers. Tonight was the first time she's ever challenged the council on my behalf. He was quiet for a moment. "I think she's tired of the performance. Of pretending our arrangement is anything more than political convenience." Astrid finally looked at him. In the moonlight, the Alpha looked younger, more vulnerable. "Do you love her?" "I respect her. She's intelligent, graceful, everything an Alpha's mate should be. But love?" He shook his head. "We've been too busy managing appearances to discover if we could be more. And now everything's complicated. Lars adores you. Signa is questioning the foundations of our arrangement. The council sees me as increasingly erratic. And you?" He turned to face her fully, and Astrid's breath caught at the intensity in his ice-blue eyes. "You've become the center of a storm I didn't see coming. I never wanted to disrupt anything." "I know. That's what makes it worse. You're not trying to manipulate or scheme. You're just being yourself, and somehow that's enough to shake everything loose." They stood in silence, the weight of unspoken things heavy between them. Finally Stellan spoke again. "The blood oath ties us together, but it's more than legal obligation now. Whether I like it or not, your fate and mine are genuinely intertwined. If you fall, I fall. If you rise..." He stopped himself. "I don't know what happens if you rise. I'm not trying to rise, Alpha. I'm trying to survive. Maybe that's the same thing." He left her there in the gardens, and Astrid stood under the stars wondering how she'd gone from invisible to the center of pack politics. Wondering why the Alpha's eyes seemed to look at her differently now. Wondering what Lady Signa was really thinking behind her support. Most of all, wondering why a 3-year-old boy had been so certain she deserved saving, and whether she could possibly live up to that faith. The months that followed brought an uneasy peace. Astrid continued working in the kitchens, but her role evolved. Cook Margaret, seeing her intelligence and work ethic, began teaching her more complex tasks, managing supplies, coordinating staff, even planning menus for formal dinners. It was more responsibility than Astrid had ever had, and she attacked it with the same fierce determination that had kept her alive on the streets. Lars visited daily, their friendship deepening into something that resembled family. He brought her drawings, told her secrets, asked her advice on everything from dealing with difficult tutors to whether girls could be alphas too. Helga still supervised, but even she'd softened, occasionally smiling at their interactions. Lady Signa remained cordial but distant, though sometimes Astrid caught her watching with an expression that might have been curiosity or might have been calculation. It was impossible to tell. Stellan's nightly reports continued, but they'd changed. Instead of just accounting for her day, they'd evolved into actual conversations. Discussions about pack politics, philosophical debates about law and justice, even occasional arguments about how leadership should function. Astrid found herself looking forward to these sessions, to the intellectual sparring with someone who didn't treat her like a criminal or a charity case but like an equal. It should have worried her, this growing connection with the alpha. But loneliness has its own gravity, and after years of isolation, the pull of genuine human connection was too strong to resist. Then everything changed on a cold morning in late winter. Astrid was in the storage cellars, counting sacks of grain, when she heard shouting from above. She climbed the stairs to find the kitchen in chaos, servants running, guards shouting orders, cook Margaret pale as death. What happened? Margaret grabbed her arm. It's Lars. He's missing. The world tilted. What do you mean missing? He was in the gardens with Helga. She turned her back for one moment and he vanished. They've searched everywhere but there's no sign of him. Astrid's mind raced. Lars wouldn't just wander off. He was curious but obedient, and he knew the palace was dangerous for unsupervised children. The old gatehouse, Astrid said suddenly. He mentioned it last week, said he wanted to explore, but Helga said no. She ran before Margaret could respond, racing through corridors toward the abandoned gatehouse on the palace's eastern side. It was structurally unsafe, scheduled for demolition, strictly off-limits. Exactly the kind of place a curious 3-year-old might venture if given the opportunity. The gatehouse door hung open. Astrid plunged into darkness, calling Lars's name. The building groaned around her, centuries of neglect evident in crumbling stone and rotted wood. She climbed stairs that cracked under her weight, pushed through rooms thick with dust. Then she heard it, a child's whimper from above. She found him on the 3rd floor, trapped behind a collapsed beam that had fallen across the doorway. He was crying but appeared uninjured, just terrified and alone. Astrid! Relief flooded his face. I'm stuck. I can't get out. She examined the beam. It was massive, probably weighing more than she did. But she had to try. She braced herself, gripped the beam, and pulled with everything she had. Shifted. Not much but enough. Lars, when I lift you need to squeeze through. Can you do that? He nodded, face determined despite tears. Astrid took a breath, then pulled again. Her muscles screamed. The beam lifted inches. Lars scrambled through the gap and she let it drop, collapsing against the wall. Are you okay? She checked him quickly, finding only scrapes and dirt. I'm sorry. I just wanted to see the tower room. I didn't mean to. It's okay. Let's get you home. They descended carefully, Astrid keeping Lars close. But as they neared the ground floor, she heard the ominous crack of overstressed wood. She looked up just in time to see the 3rd floor ceiling beginning to collapse. She grabbed Lars and ran. They burst through the door as the entire gatehouse came down behind them, 3 stories of stone and timber crashing into rubble and dust. The impact threw them forward onto the grass, Astrid curling around Lars to protect him from flying debris. When the dust settled, they looked back at what had been a building. Now it was just a pile of destruction. Astrid! Stellan's voice roared across the grounds. He ran toward them, Signa right behind him, both their faces transformed by fear and relief. Stellan reached them first, dropping to his knees and pulling Lars into his arms. Gods, Lars, you're safe. You're safe. He held his son like he'd never let go, his entire body shaking. Signa joined them, tears streaming down her face, touching Lars everywhere to assure herself he was real and unharmed. What were you thinking? You could have died. Astrid saved me. Lars's voice was muffled against his father's chest. She pulled me out before the building fell. Stellan's eyes found Astrid's over his son's head. In them she saw something that made her breath catch. Gratitude, yes, but also something deeper, something she didn't dare name. You went in there. Signa looked at her with new eyes. The gatehouse was about to collapse. You could have died. Lars needed help. She lifted a huge beam all by herself. Lars pulled back from his father, animated now that the fear was fading. She was so strong and brave. Papa, did you see? She's a hero. Stellan stood, still holding Lars, but his attention remained on Astrid. You saved my son. The blood oath. Forget the blood oath. You put yourself in mortal danger for a child you've known barely months. That's not obligation. That's something else entirely. Commander Bjorn arrived with guards, assessing the destruction. When he heard what happened, his expression shifted, not to friendliness exactly, but to grudging respect. You could have just alerted the guards. We would have handled it. There wasn't time. No, Bjorn acknowledged. There wasn't. He looked at Stellan. Perhaps I judged too quickly, my lord. That night, after Lars had been bathed and fed and put to bed with extra stories, after the excitement had faded to whispers throughout the palace, Signa came to Astrid's room. It was the first time the lady had sought her out privately. May I come in? Astrid stepped aside, nervous. Her room suddenly felt impossibly small with Signa's presence filling it. Signa sat on the single chair, leaving Astrid to stand awkwardly. For a long moment neither spoke. Finally, Signa broke the silence. I've been unfair to you. My lady. I've watched you with suspicion for months, waiting for you to reveal some ulterior motive. To show that you were using Lars's affection, manipulating Stellan's guilt, scheming for position or power. She looked up, and her eyes were soft with something that might have been shame. But you're not doing any of that, are you? No, my lady. You simply exist. You work hard. You're kind to my son. You challenge Stellan in ways no one else dares, make him think about leadership differently. And today you risked your life without hesitation because a child needed help. Signa stood, approaching until they stood face to face. You're not what I expected. And I think that terrifies me. I don't understand. Don't you? Signa's smile was sad. I see how Stellan looks at you during your nightly reports. I see how alive he becomes when he's arguing with you about some philosophical point. I see him becoming the man I thought I'd married. Passionate, thoughtful, willing to question everything instead of just enforcing tradition. Astrid's heart began to pound. My lady, I would never. I know. That's what makes this so complicated. You're not trying to steal him. But he's discovering things with you that he and I never found in 5 years of engagement. Connection. Genuine respect. The possibility of partnership rather than political arrangement. What are you saying? Signa walked to the window, looking out at the palace grounds. I'm saying that I've spent 5 years preparing to be Alpha's mate, learning protocol and politics, perfect in every way except the one that matters. I don't love him. And he doesn't love me. We're fond of each other, we respect each other, but there's no fire, no passion, no genuine partnership. She turned back to Astrid. I'm saying that maybe Lars saved you for reasons none of us understand. Maybe the prophecy is real, or maybe it's just coincidence. But either way, you've become something important. To Lars, to Stellan, perhaps even to the entire pack's future. I'm just a thief trying to survive. No. You're a Sylvan woman with Alpha's blood in your veins, bound by oath to the most powerful man in the realm, who's beginning to realize she's not the criminal he sentenced but someone worth knowing. Signa's expression was complex, sad, resigned, but also oddly hopeful. And I think it's time I stopped pretending our engagement is anything more than a convenient fiction. Astrid couldn't breathe. You're not suggesting. I'm not suggesting anything yet. But I am acknowledging reality. Stellan and I have been engaged for 5 years without setting a wedding date. We've produced an heir without sharing true intimacy. We've built a partnership of protocol without ever discovering if we could be genuine partners. She moved toward the door, pausing at the threshold. I won't stand in the way of what might be real simply to preserve what's always been false. That would be a different kind of cruelty. She left Astrid standing in the small room, mind reeling from revelations that changed everything and nothing all at once. The next morning, rumors spread like wildfire. The council convened an emergency session. Elder Torsten, sensing opportunity in the chaos, called for immediate discussion of the Sylvan situation and its impact on pack stability. But this time, Stellan didn't wait for debate. He stood before the council with Lars at his side, the boy's small hand in his father's large one. The blood oath was originally granted because my son intervened to save a thief's life. Yesterday, that same woman risked her life to save my son. The circle is complete. Whatever debt she owed to pack law has been paid in full through her actions. Elder Magnus nodded approval. Several others murmured agreement. Furthermore, Stellan continued, his voice carrying power that demanded attention, I'm formally declaring Astrid Sylvan to be under permanent pack protection. Her bloodline is no longer grounds for persecution. Anyone who moves against her moves against me personally. The room exploded with reactions. But before Torsten could organize opposition, Lady Signa stood. I second the Alpha's decree. Silence fell like a hammer. Moreover, Signa continued, her voice steady and clear, I am formally requesting dissolution of our engagement. Not due to any failure on the Alpha's part, but because I believe we both deserve the opportunity to choose our paths rather than follow arrangements made by others. Stellan's shock was evident, but he recovered quickly. Lady Signa, you don't have to. I want to, Stellan. We've been friends, partners in leadership, parents to a wonderful child. But we've never been truly bonded, never felt the connection that makes pack law speak of soulmates and eternal bonds. You've shown me more passion arguing about justice with Astrid than you ever showed planning our wedding. That tells me everything I need to know. She looked around the room, meeting the stunned expressions of the council. I will remain in the palace as Lars's mother and as advisor to the Alpha. But I release Stellan from any obligation to marry me. Let him choose his own path, as I intend to choose mine. Elder Torsten tried desperately to regain control. This is madness. The engagement was meant to unite our packs. You can't simply. I can and I have. Unless you're suggesting the council has authority over personal relationships. That would be an interesting precedent. Checkmate. If the council claimed such authority, they'd open the door to far-reaching control over private lives. If they didn't, Signa's dissolution stood. Stellan looked at his former betrothed with something like awe. Signa, I thank you. For everything. For Lars. For your patience. For understanding what I couldn't admit even to myself. Just promise me one thing. Whatever you choose next, make sure it's real. Life's too short for anything less. That night, when Astrid arrived for her usual report, everything felt different. The study seemed smaller, more intimate. Stellan seemed younger, less burdened by the weight of expectation and duty. He gestured for her to sit, but instead of moving to his desk, he sat in the chair beside hers. We need to talk. Astrid's heart hammered. Yes, Alpha. Please stop calling me that when we're alone. My name is Stellan. That's not appropriate. Appropriate stopped mattering somewhere between my son stopping your execution and you pulling him from a collapsing building. He ran his hands through his hair, A gesture of frustration she'd never seen from him. I've spent months telling myself our connection was just the blood oath, just proximity, just circumstance. But today, when I saw that gatehouse collapse with you inside, my entire world stopped. Not because of the oath. Because the thought of losing you was unbearable. Stellan, I know this is complicated. You were my prisoner, my responsibility, someone I sentenced to death. The power dynamic alone makes this questionable. But I also know what I feel when you walk into this room each night. What I feel when you challenge me, argue with me, force me to see beyond the comfortable certainty of tradition. Astrid stood, pacing. You can't mean this. You're the Alpha. I'm a Silveran thief who survived on mercy. There are centuries of history between our bloodlines, political consequences you can't ignore. Lars saw past all of that in seconds. Why can't we? Because he's 3. He doesn't understand politics or pack dynamics or what it means for an alpha to show favor to someone like me. Someone like you. Stellan stood, approaching her slowly. You mean someone brave, honest, intelligent and kind? Someone who values principle over comfort. Someone who makes me want to be better than I am. I mean someone who has nothing to offer you except complications. You've already given me more than Signa and I found in 5 years. You've given me genuine partnership. Someone who sees me as a person rather than a position. You've given me perspective I desperately needed. You've given my son a friend who teaches him more about honor and courage than any tutor ever could. He stopped directly before her, so close she could feel the heat of his body. And whether you intended to or not, you've given me something I thought leaders couldn't afford. Hope that there might be more to life than duty and tradition. Astrid's breath caught. I'm scared. So am I. But I'm more scared of never finding out what this could be. The kiss happened so naturally it felt inevitable. His hand cupping her face, her lips rising to meet his, the world narrowing to just this moment, this connection, this perfect impossible rightness. When they finally broke apart, Astrid whispered, "The council will riot. Let them. Your pack will question your judgment. They already do. This violates every tradition, every expectation. Good. Maybe it's time we built new traditions." He kissed her again, and this time Astrid stopped arguing, stopped thinking, stopped being anything except exactly what she was. A Silveran woman falling in love with a Vargsson alpha, proving that sometimes the most powerful magic is simply choosing connection over fear. They spent hours talking that night, not about politics or pack law but about themselves. Childhoods and dreams, fears and hopes, all the things that make people real rather than just roles they play. Astrid learned that Stellan had never wanted to be alpha, that he'd taken the position out of duty after his father's death, that he'd been engaged to Signa before they'd even met as adults, their future decided by families who saw only political advantage. Stellan learned about Astrid's parents, about their quiet dignity even in exile, about the lessons they'd taught her about honor and integrity even when the world seemed determined to crush both, about the fear she'd lived with every day, knowing her bloodline was a death sentence if discovered. As dawn approached, Astrid realized something fundamental had shifted. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, really living with hopes and dreams beyond simply making it through another day. "What happens now?" she asked finally. Stellan pulled her close, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Now we face whatever comes together. The council will object. Some pack members will be horrified. Torsten will probably try to have us both executed for violating about 70 different traditions. That's not reassuring. No, but it's honest. This won't be easy, Astrid. Loving you means facing opposition I can't simply command away. It means standing against people who genuinely believe I'm destroying everything they value. And you think I'm worth that?" He tilted her face up to meet his eyes. "I think you're worth everything." The story should have ended there. The thief and the alpha, finding love against all odds. But fate is rarely so simple, and the forces gathering against them were more dangerous than either realized. Because in the shadows of the palace, Elder Torsten was plotting. Because Commander Bjorn, despite his grudging respect, still believed mixing Vargsson and Sylvan blood was abomination. Because there were secrets buried in pack history that neither Astrid nor Stellan knew, secrets that would explode everything they'd built. And because sometimes the greatest love stories are also the most dangerous. 3 days after Stellan and Astrid's first kiss, Elder Torsten called for a private council meeting. Stellan wasn't invited. Neither were the younger elders like Magnus who'd shown support for change. This was old guard only, the ones who remembered the original Sylvan betrayal, who'd built their power on the foundation of that exile. What Stellan didn't know was that Torsten had found something in the ancient archives. A document sealed by Stellan's father decades ago, marked with blood oath protection that prevented anyone from revealing its contents without facing death. Except Torsten had found a loophole. He couldn't speak the truth directly, but he could arrange for the truth to reveal itself through natural circumstances. And that's exactly what he planned to do. Meanwhile, Astrid's life had transformed in ways both wonderful and terrifying. Word had spread quickly about the Alpha's dissolved engagement and his obvious favor toward the Sylvan woman. Some pack members were genuinely happy, seeing it as romantic proof that love conquered tradition. Others were horrified, viewing it as the beginning of the end for pack purity and proper leadership. The servants in the kitchen had divided into factions. Some, like Cook Margaret, defended Astrid fiercely. Others whispered that she'd seduced the Alpha, that she was using dark Sylvan magic, that she'd destroy the pack from within. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Lars, oblivious to most of the politics, was simply thrilled. "Are you going to be my new mama?" he asked one afternoon while Astrid helped him with his letters. "It's more complicated than that, little one." "Why? Papa loves you. You love Papa." Mama Signa said it's okay. "Love you." "What's complicated?" From the mouths of children. Astrid kissed the top of his golden head, unable to explain the centuries of bloodshed and betrayal that made their situation so fraught. That evening, as Astrid walked toward Stellan's study for their nightly meeting, Commander Bjorn intercepted her in the corridor. "We need to talk. Privately." His tone was urgent, almost frightened. Astrid followed him to an empty side chamber, where he closed the door and checked that no one was listening. "I don't know all the details, but something's happening. Torsten and the old guard have been meeting secretly. They're planning something against you, against the Alpha, possibly against Lars." "What kind of plan?" "I don't know. But they've been consulting the oldest archives, ones sealed by blood oath. And they've been sending ravens to other packs, ones that still maintain the old traditions about Sylvan blood." Astrid's stomach dropped. "You're saying they might try to kill you? Overthrow Stellan?" "I don't know. But I've served this pack for 20 years, and I know conspiracy when I see it." Bjorn's expression was conflicted. "I didn't trust you. Thought you were trouble. But you saved Lars and you've made the Alpha better, sharper, more thoughtful. If Torsten succeeds in whatever he's planning, it won't just destroy you. It'll break something fundamental in Stellan, maybe in the whole pack." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm loyal to the Alpha, not to a council of old men who can't accept that the world has changed. And because my job is protecting the heir, which means protecting the people who matter to him. That includes you now, whether I like it or not." "What should I do?" "Tell Stellan. But be careful. If Torsten knows we're aware of his plans, he might accelerate whatever he's planning. We need to find out what's in those archives first." Astrid reported everything to Stellan that night. His expression went from concerned to furious as she spoke. "Torsten swore loyalty to me when I took the Alpha position. If he's actively plotting against us, that's treason. Can you arrest him?" "Not without proof. And if those archives are protected by blood oath, anyone who tries to read them without authorization dies instantly. My father was paranoid about certain documents. He made sure they'd be impossible to access after his death." "Then how do we find out what's in them?" Stellan paced, thinking. "There might be one way. Blood oath protections are tied to bloodline. My father sealed them with his blood, which means someone of his direct line should theoretically be able to access them without triggering the death curse. You mean you could read them? Maybe. Or Lars could, though I'd never risk my son that way. But there's a problem. The archive vault requires 2 keys. Have one as alpha. The other was given to the council's eldest elder for safekeeping. Which means Torsten has it. Exactly. So we need to get his key without him knowing we're suspicious. They spent hours planning, but every approach seemed too risky or too obvious. Finally, Astrid suggested something that made Stellan immediately shake his head. No. Absolutely not. It's the only way that makes sense. I could seduce him. I said no. Not literally seduce him, Astrid clarified. But I could pretend to betray you. Tell Torsten that I'm having doubts about us, that I'm worried about the pack's reaction, that I want to make peace with the old guard. He thinks I'm a corrupting influence anyway. He'd love to believe I'm abandoning you. It's too dangerous. If he sees through the deception, then we're no worse off than we are now. But if it works, I might be able to get close enough to steal the key. Stellan pulled her into his arms, holding tight. I just found you. I can't lose you. You won't. I survived on the streets for 2 years, Stellan. I know how to be invisible, how to play weak and harmless. Trust me. I do trust you. That's what terrifies me. The plan was set in motion the next day. Astrid began avoiding Stellan publicly, looking distressed whenever someone mentioned their relationship. She made sure servants overheard her crying in the kitchen. She stopped attending the nightly reports, sending word that she needed time to think. Within 2 days, Elder Torsten approached her. Walk with me, child. His voice was grandfatherly, kind in a way that made Astrid's skin crawl. They walked through the palace gardens, far from listening ears. I understand you're struggling with your situation. I never wanted to cause problems, Elder. I was just trying to survive. Of course you were. And the Alpha was moved by mercy, by his son's compassion. Noble sentiments. Torsten's tone suggested nobility was weakness. But you've seen the consequences. Pack is divided. Ancient traditions are being questioned. You've brought chaos simply by existing. I know. Astrid let tears fall. Not entirely fake. The strain of the past months was real enough. I don't know what to do. I care about Stellan, but I see what this is costing him. Then perhaps you should leave. Leave. For his sake. For the pack's sake. For your own sake, truly. I could arrange safe passage to another territory. Give you gold enough to start fresh somewhere the silver name doesn't carry death sentences. You could be free. Astrid pretended to consider it. Would that really help? Or would he just come after me? Not if you left clearly, definitively. A letter explaining that you can't be the reason his pack tears itself apart. He'd be hurt, but he'd understand. And in time he'd move forward, perhaps eventually marry properly and secure the pack's future. You've thought about this a lot. Torsten's smile was cold. I think about the pack's welfare constantly. It's my duty as elder. Can I think about it? This is a big decision. Of course. But don't take too long. Forces are building that may make the decision for you if you delay. Was that a threat? Astrid couldn't be sure, but the implication was clear. Agree to leave or something worse would happen. Over the next week, Astrid played her role perfectly. She seemed increasingly withdrawn, conflicted, on the verge of running. Torsten courted her decision carefully, painting pictures of the peaceful life she could have elsewhere, the danger she faced if she stayed. Finally, she told him she'd decided to leave. But she had one request. I want to see the documents about the original Silveran exile. I want to understand what my ancestors did that was so terrible it justifies everything that's happened since. If I'm leaving forever, I deserve to know the truth. Torsten hesitated. This wasn't part of his plan. But Astrid played it perfectly. The young woman seeking closure, trying to understand her heritage before abandoning it forever. Those documents are sealed, child. protected by blood oath. But you have access to the archives, don't you? As eldest elder. I don't need to read them myself. Just tell me, please. I need to know if my bloodline truly is cursed, if leaving is the right choice. He considered it. Saw opportunity maybe. If she understood how terrible her ancestors were, she'd leave more convinced of her own unworthiness. And if she was leaving anyway, what harm could the truth do? Very well. Meet me at the archive vault tonight after midnight. I'll show you the truth of what your people did. Astrid reported back to Stellan immediately. He took the bait. Tonight we find out what my father was so desperate to hide. We're going together. I won't let you face this alone. If you appear, he'll know it's a setup. Has to be me alone. But, she pulled out a small mirror from her pocket. Commander Bjorn gave me this. It's been enchanted to record everything it sees. You'll be able to watch from your study. If something goes wrong, Bjorn will have guards positioned nearby. Stellan kissed her deeply, desperately. If anything happens to you, it won't. I've survived worse than one old man's plots. Midnight came cold and moonless. Astrid met Torsten at the entrance to the palace's deepest levels, where the ancient archives waited in climate-controlled darkness. He held a lantern in one hand and a large iron key in the other. Are you certain you want to know? Some truths are better left buried. I'm certain. They descended stairs that seemed to go on forever, into depths Astrid hadn't known existed beneath the palace. Finally, they reached a massive door inscribed with runes that glowed faintly in the lantern light. Torsten used his key on one lock. The Alpha's key would open the second lock, but I've learned to manage with just one. Takes longer, but it works. He manipulated something in the door's mechanism, whispering words in the old tongue. The door swung open with a groan that sounded almost alive. Inside, the vault was enormous. Shelf after shelf of documents, books, scrolls, all perfectly preserved. Torsten moved with the confidence of someone who'd been here many times, which itself was suspicious. These archives were supposed to be rarely accessed. He pulled a leather-bound folder from a shelf marked with warning symbols. This is the truth about your precious Silveren pack. Read it yourself. Astrid opened the folder, positioning it so the mirror in her pocket would capture the text. What she read made her blood run cold. The Silveren pack hadn't betrayed Stellan's father. They discovered that he was planning to assassinate neighboring Alphas to expand his territory, to break the ancient peace treaties that kept the realm stable. They'd confronted him publicly, demanding he abandon his plans. Rather than admit his guilt, Stellan's father had accused them of plotting against him, of planning rebellion. He'd manufactured evidence, bribed witnesses, and used his Alpha authority to exile them before they could reveal his crimes. The Silveren hadn't been traitors. They'd been whistleblowers, people of conscience who'd paid the ultimate price for speaking truth to power. My entire life, Astrid whispered. My parents lived in shame for a crime they didn't commit. They died believing they deserved exile. Does it matter? The official story is what people believe. The truth died with those who knew better. Why keep these documents then? Why not destroy them? Insurance, Torsten said simply. Your father wasn't the only Alpha who's bent rules for power. Sometimes it's useful to have leverage, to know where bodies are buried, metaphorically and literally. Astrid looked up at him, seeing him clearly for the first time. You've been blackmailing Alphas for decades. I've been ensuring stability. Alphas who know their secrets are documented tend to be more cautious with their authority. And Stellan, what secrets of his do you have locked away down here? Torsten's smile was predatory. Stellan's secret isn't his own. It's his father's shame passed down through blood. But you've given me a new one. The noble Alpha, so infatuated with a Silveren thief that he can't see he's being manipulated. Astrid's heart began to race. I'm not manipulating anyone. Aren't you? You came down here pretending to want closure, but really you were trying to steal information, weren't you? That little mirror in your pocket isn't as subtle as you think. He'd known. This whole time he'd known it was a setup. The question is, Torsten continued, moving to block the exit, what do I do with you now? Could kill you here. The archives have conveniences for disposing of problems. Or I could bring you before the council, prove you were stealing secrets, use it as leverage to force Stellan to dissolve the blood oath and exile you properly. Astrid backed away, mind racing. Stellan knows I'm here. If I don't return, he'll come looking, yes, and find you dead of the blood oath curse. Apparently you tried to read sealed documents without proper authorization. Tragic, really. But it would solve several problems at once. He moved toward her, and Astrid realized with crystal clarity that she'd underestimated him, that his grandfatherly kindness had masked genuine malice, that he'd been planning this from the moment she approached him. She turned and ran deeper into the archives, hoping to find another exit, buy time for help to arrive. But Torsten knew these tunnels. Within minutes, he'd herded her into a dead end, a small chamber lined with books that seemed to absorb sound. No one can hear you down here. The walls are enchanted for silence. Can't have people overhearing sensitive conversations about sealed documents. Astrid looked around desperately for anything she could use as a weapon. Nothing but books and brittle scrolls. Why are you doing this? What do you gain from killing me? I gain a pack that remembers its place. I gain an alpha who learns that emotion is weakness. I gain the satisfaction of knowing that Sylvan blood won't corrupt what I've spent 40 years building. He pulled out a knife, its blade etched with runes. This is a ceremonial blade, one used in blood oath rituals. If I kill you with it, the oath between you and Stellan triggers immediately. You both die. The pack loses an alpha who's too soft to lead properly, and I get to shape Lars's upbringing into what it should be. Hard, traditional, uncompromising. You'd murder your own alpha. That's treason. It's salvation. And it'll look like the blood oath curse, not murder. No one will know. He lunged. Astrid dove aside, using her years of street fighting instincts. She wasn't strong enough to beat him in direct combat, but she was faster, more desperate. She threw books at him, knocked over shelves, created chaos and obstacles. But he was patient, methodical, and this was his territory. Eventually, he cornered her again, this time with no escape route visible. I'll make it quick, he said, almost kindly. You don't deserve to suffer. You're just a victim of circumstances, really. Wrong bloodline, wrong time, wrong alpha to fall in love with. The blade came at her chest. Astrid twisted, felt it slice across her arm instead, burning like fire. The pain was excruciating, not just physical but magical, the oath curse beginning to activate. Then Stellan appeared in the doorway. He moved like lightning, crossing the space and slamming into Torsten with enough force to shatter ribs. The ceremonial knife clattered across the floor. Stellan didn't give the old man a chance to recover. He was on him, hands around his throat, eyes wild with fury. You tried to kill her. You tried to kill me through her. You betrayed everything an elder is supposed to be. Astrid clutched her burning arm, feeling the curse spreading through her blood. Stellan, stop. The curse. He looked at her, saw the blood, understood immediately what it meant. His face went pale. The blood oath curse was simple. If one died through violence, the other followed. The ceremonial knife's cut had initiated the process. Unless the curse was stopped, she had minutes to live. And so did he. Commander Bjorn arrived with guards, drawn by the commotion the enchanted walls couldn't fully contain. He took in the scene instantly, Torsten on the ground, gasping for breath, Astrid bleeding from a cursed wound, Stellan torn between fury and terror. Get Elder Magnus, Stellan barked. Now. We need someone who knows blood oath magic. Magnus arrived within minutes, his face grave as he examined Astrid's wound. The ceremonial blade. Gods, Torsten, what have you done? What had to be done? Torsten gasped out. The Sylvan Must not, corrupt. Shut up, Magnus snapped, more angry than Astrid had ever heard him. This isn't justice or tradition. This is murder. He turned to Stellan. The curse is active. Once initiated with a ceremonial blade, it can only be stopped by the original Oathmaker's death or by completing the ritual of dissolution, which requires 3 days of ceremony and both parties alive and willing. We don't have 3 days. Stellan's voice cracked. Can't you do something? There's one other option. The curse targets the blood oath bond. If you strengthen that bond, make it deeper, more permanent, it might overwhelm the curse's magic. But that means... Tell me. Magnus looked between them, seeing the truth neither had fully acknowledged. True mate bonding. The oldest magic, the kind that supersedes all laws and oaths. If you're genuinely meant to be together, if your souls recognize each other as true mates, the bonding ceremony will override the curse. But if you're not... He trailed off, the implication clear. If they attempted mate bonding and weren't truly compatible, it would accelerate the curse, killing them both within minutes instead of hours. Stellan knelt beside Astrid, taking her uninjured hand. Do it. We'll do the mate bonding. Are you sure? If this is just attraction, just circumstance. I've never been more certain of anything. Astrid met his eyes, seeing past fear to absolute conviction. She felt it too, the certainty that whatever they'd found together was deeper than logic, stronger than circumstance. From the moment Lars had stopped the chariot, their fates had been intertwined in ways that went beyond legal bonds. I'm sure too. Magnus worked quickly, pulling ceremonial items from a bag Bjorn had grabbed from his quarters. A bowl, salt, water, candles. The mate bonding ritual was ancient, rarely performed anymore because true mates were so rare that most packs had stopped believing in them. Join hands. Both of you. They did, Stellan's large warm hand enveloping Astrid's cold, blood-stained one. Repeat after me, by blood and bone, by soul and breath, I claim you as my mate eternal. They spoke the words together, voices shaking but clear. By pack law and natural law, by choice and fate, I bind myself to you across all time, all lives, all worlds. The words resonated with power that made the air vibrate. Let no force divide us. Let no death separate us. Let our souls recognize what our hearts already know, that we are two parts of one whole, forever joined. As they spoke the final words, light erupted from their joined hands. Pure white shot through with silver and gold. It spread up their arms, across their bodies, until both of them were glowing with power that shouldn't exist in the modern world. The curse fought back. Astrid could feel it trying to spread, to kill her and trigger Stellan's death. But the mate bond was stronger, ancient magic recognizing its own. The light burned away the curse like fog before sunrise, purified her blood, healed the wound on her arm until only a faint silver scar remained. When the light faded, they were changed. Not physically, they looked the same. But Astrid could feel Stellan now, not just emotionally but fundamentally. She could sense his heartbeat, his emotions, his presence in her mind like a warm, constant glow. And from his expression, he felt the same about her. True mates, Magnus whispered, awed. I never thought I'd see it in my lifetime. Torsten stared from the ground, his face twisted with disbelief and rage. No, this isn't possible. Vargsson and Silvran can't be true mates. The bloodlines are enemies. The bloodlines are connected, Stellan corrected coldly. My father made them enemies. But maybe they were always meant to come back together. Maybe that's what the prophecy meant. Not political alliance but genuine soul bond. He stood, pulling Astrid up with him, and turned to face Torsten with judgment in his eyes. Elder Torsten, you are accused of attempted murder of your alpha and his mate, of conspiracy against pack law, of blackmail and corruption spanning decades. How do you plead? I plead. Devoted to tradition. Everything I did was to preserve your power, your control, your ability to manipulate through fear and secrets. Stellan's voice was ice. You're stripped of your position as elder. You'll stand trial before the full pack council for your crimes. If convicted, the penalty is exile. You'll experience what you helped inflict on the Silvern Pack so long ago. Guards took Torsten away, his protests echoing through the archives until distance swallowed them. Astrid leaned against Stellan, exhaustion and relief making her shake. That was too close. I know. When I saw him with that blade, Stellan's voice broke. I thought I'd lost you. Thought I'd killed you by tying you to me with that oath. You saved me. Both times. Once from execution, once from the curse. We saved each other. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. And now we're bound in a way that no council can dissolve, no tradition can question. True mates are sacred in pack law. Even the most conservative elders will have to accept this. Will they though? Or will this just make things worse? Magnus, who'd been giving them privacy, spoke up. The mate bond glowed white silver gold. That's the traditional sign of blessing by the old gods. Anyone who questions it questions divine will itself. It won't make everyone happy, but it will make opposition much more difficult. He was right. When news spread of the mate bonding, and of Torsten's betrayal, the pack's reaction was complex but ultimately accepting. Those who'd supported Astrid felt vindicated. Those who'd opposed her couldn't argue against divine blessing without suggesting the gods themselves were wrong. And the revelation of the true Silvern history, captured by Astrid's mirror and now shared with the entire pack, forced a reckoning with decades of unjust tradition. The formal trial took weeks. Evidence mounted against Torsten, not just from Astrid's experience but from others he'd manipulated over the years. Alphas from neighboring packs came forward with tales of blackmail and extortion. The council voted unanimously for exile, and Torsten was escorted beyond pack borders with nothing but the clothes on his back, exactly as the Silvern had been decades before. Elder Magnus became the council's new head. His first official act was proposing a formal pardon for the Silvern pack, acknowledging the injustice done to them. It passed with only minor opposition. Lars, through all of this, remained the story's brightest light. When told that Astrid was now officially his stepmother through mate bonding, he cheered and hugged her so hard she couldn't breathe. I knew you were supposed to stay. I told everyone but they didn't listen. You were very wise, little one. When I'm alpha, I'm going to make a law that says we have to listen to kids more. Because sometimes kids are right and grown-ups are silly. Lady Signa watched from nearby, her smile genuine. She'd remained in the palace as promised, co-parenting Lars and serving as Stellan's advisor. There was no awkwardness between them. Their relationship had evolved into genuine friendship, based on mutual respect and shared love for Lars. She approached Astrid later, when they were briefly alone. Thank you for making him happy, Signa said simply. I never could, we were too similar, both too focused on duty to find passion. But you've given him something I never could. Joy. I never meant to come between. You didn't come between anything real. You revealed what was missing and helped him find it. That's a gift. He paused. I'm seeing someone actually. A merchant captain from the Eastern Territories. He's not what anyone would expect for the former Alpha's betrothed. But he makes me laugh. Makes me feel like I'm more than just my position. I'm happy for you, Signa. Truly. We both deserve happiness. You've taught me that. The formal mating ceremony came a month later, this time with full pack celebration. Thousands gathered to witness Stellan and Astrid speak their vows, to celebrate not just their union but the healing of old wounds, the end of ancient hostilities. The ceremony was held at sunset, on the grounds between what had once been Silvern territory and Vargsson lands. A bridge between worlds, a promise that the future would be built on unity rather than division. Astrid wore silver, the color of her bloodline, while Stellan wore black and silver intertwined. When they joined hands, the mate bond light appeared again, visible to everyone, undeniable proof of divine blessing. Elder Magnus officiated, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. Today we witness not just a mating ceremony but a prophecy fulfilled. The Silvran and Vargsson bloodlines, separated by fear and pride, reunited through compassion and courage. May their union remind us that the greatest strength lies not in maintaining walls but in having the courage to tear them down. The celebration lasted 3 days. People came from across the realm. Other packs, neighboring territories, even some of the exiled Silvran families who'd survived in distant lands. There were tears, reconciliations, promises to build something better than what had come before. On the final night, Stellan and Astrid slipped away from the festivities to the palace gardens where everything had changed those months ago. The stars were bright overhead, the same stars that had witnessed her arrest, her salvation, her transformation from invisible thief to true mate of an alpha. "Did you ever imagine this?" Stellan asked, pulling her close. "That night in the dungeon when I sentenced you to death, could you have imagined we'd end here?" "No. I was too busy being terrified and trying to figure out how to die with dignity." "I'm glad you failed. Failed at dying with dignity. You fought instead. You survived. You forced me to see past law to justice, past tradition to truth." He kissed her deep and sweet. "You saved me as much as I saved you. We saved each other." Astrid looked up at the palace, where lights blazed in celebration. "What happens now? We've fixed the past, united the bloodlines, proven true mates exist. What's left? Now we build the future. Together." He placed a hand on her stomach, where new life was just beginning. Secret knowledge shared only between them and the mate bond. "All of us together." Astrid placed her hand over his, feeling the flutter of the life they'd created. A child who would carry both bloodlines, who would grow up in a world healed by compassion, who would never know the hatred that had defined previous generations. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you more." "Impossible. I loved you first. You arrested me and sentenced me to death. That's not love. I saved you from execution. That's very loving. You were forced to buy your toddler son." Minor detail. They laughed, the sound carrying across the gardens, joining the music and celebration drifting from the palace. And in the nursery, Lars slept peacefully, dreaming of the adventure he'd had, the day he'd stopped a chariot and saved a woman who'd become his mother, who'd taught him that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is show mercy to someone the world has condemned. He didn't know that his small act of compassion had fulfilled ancient prophecy, healed bloodline divisions, and brought true mates together. He just knew he'd been right, that the sad, hungry woman with kind eyes had deserved saving. And he'd been right. But this isn't the end of Astrid and Stellan's story. Because in the shadows beyond Pact territory, forces were stirring. Other alphas who saw the unification of Silvran and Vargsson as threat rather than hope. Ancient enemies who'd benefited from the realm's divisions and now faced a united power they couldn't control. And deep in the archives, there were more sealed documents, more secrets, more truths that could shake everything they'd built. The battle for Astrid's life was over. But the battle for their future, for Lars's inheritance, for the unified pact they'd created, for the very soul of what leadership meant, was only beginning. And as Astrid stood in those gardens, hand on her growing belly, mate bond singing in her blood, she felt the first whisper of warning. A cold wind from the north, carrying the scent of old magic and older hatred. The prophecy had said the bloodlines would unite.